Welcome to Her Success Matters, a podcast that helps women build a pathway to having a more successful career in financial services. I am your host, Christine Shaw, Chief Executive Officer of Investment News. I am delighted to be joined today by George Nichols, President and CEO of the American College of Financial Services. George, I'm thrilled and honored to have you as our guest today on Her Success Matters. Welcome.
Thank you, Christina. I am honored myself. It is a thrill to be a part of the podcast and so excited that you would have me on a show talking about women.
As a matter of fact, funny you mentioned that. You are the second male guest we've had on this podcast. And although this podcast is titled Her Success Matters, the reality is that we need men as allies, in particular, men like you who are doing a lot to help women be successful in financial services. And in fact, that really, I want to first let your listeners hear a little bit about your background, because you are no stranger to diversity and adversity, being the very first African-American CEO of the president of the American College of Financial Services. And so we'll talk about that and then talk about all the work you're doing to empower women going forward.
Sure, thank you. You know, it's funny, my wife and I were talking the other day about the number of firsts. And it's interesting when I think about the honor of being the 10th president, first Black. I was the first Black member of the Executive Management Committee of New York Life Insurance Company. It's a 175-year-old company. I was the first Black president of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, the first Black commissioner of insurance in the state of Kentucky, and the first Black ever to run a state psychiatric hospital. And my kids were listening and they said, "So Dad, what's been the key?" And I'm like, Dad has no clue. It just sort of all happened that I had these tremendous opportunities. But I'll tell you that I think it goes back to something. When people ask me my support of women, I tell them it started at birth. I have 4 older sisters, no brothers, 4 very strong sisters, a very strong mother, a very strong wife, 2 strong daughters. And so all of my life, I've seen women achieve and do things that any man could do. So it's always just second nature to me that if I'm looking for someone, I don't think twice about it being a woman. Matter of fact, I find me more attracted to women because I see them as a minority and having to get over the challenges that I have had as a Black male.
Yeah, and those are some really important insights, and thank you for sharing some of that in your personal background. I think that being raised with a lot of women in your life definitely helps for that, but kudos to you for also recognizing and understanding how that has contributed to your learning of that and success, and also that your mission to keep that going forward and paying that forward. And that leads us into really, well, both your opening remarks at your 14th and a half conference for African American financial professionals and your article in Barron's on harnessing this moment. You spoke about one of your key priorities being developing financial literacy programs for Black women designed to address systemic wealth inequality and empower financial well-being. Tell us a little bit more about this topic and why it's so important.
Yes. Well, as the country's been dealing with the national unrest, we at the college thought about what role can we play? And as the only nonprofit accredited higher education institution just singly focused on the financial services industry, we're like, yep, I think we can play a role. Then you acknowledge the fact that the financial services industry has helped finance and birth America. So what if they took all that knowledge, all the financial capital, intellectual capital, and focused it on the Black community at this time and this moment in history? That would be great. But when you look at that, you know, there's a lot of issues. There's criminal justice, there's health issues, there's social economic issues. But we said, let's just focus on the financial and economic issues. And when you do that, we have to acknowledge the fact that 89% of the single-parent households in the Black community, and unfortunately there are a larger number of single-parent households in the Black community, they are led by a woman, 89%. And then when you look at cohabiting couples that are together, women still are at 60-70% very much a part of how the financial decisions are made. So if you want to make a difference today in the lives of those Black women, in the lives of the children that they are raising and the future generations, that's really where you need to start. And our focus is, and someone said this to me the other day, and I really, I was so happy that they acknowledged that we weren't doing it that way. This is not trying to save Black women. This is actually empowering them to unlock what is already there in them, and then giving them the additional tools to apply it. That's what it is. And then to grasp the opportunities of their future. So it's looking at women that are probably in the workforce, that are already leading their families. How do we help them get to the next level wherever they are in their life at that particular time, up into where we can help them start businesses, which is one of the fastest growing areas, is women starting businesses, especially Black women starting business. So for us, it fits perfect in the college's role of applied financial knowledge. It fits perfectly into our mission of benefiting society. And when we looked at this issue today that's going on regarding the wealth gap in Black America, we're like, it should start with women.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's a good segue, is even prior to the unrest that's going on currently in America, you created a center of excellence for women at the college. And so let's talk a little bit about that. What is this Center of Excellence for Women and what purpose does it serve?
Sure. We are so excited and proud about the State Farm Center for Women in Financial Services. Our focus is, how do we advance women through research, education, and awareness? And our focus of being sort of a leading expert on the economic and financial issues of women, both as consumers and as financial advisors. You look at the data that is showing us, obviously, women already are a large demographic in our country. There is going to be a huge wealth transfer that's going to happen in the future. And so we think you need to focus on women both as the controller of those assets and also those advising about those assets. And so we want to help them get there. And again, always remember that we're trying to do this applied approach. So the information we give them, how can it be actionable? So that's the first part. The second part is recognizing this wealth transfer, recognizing that women may want to deal with other women when it comes to their financial advice. How do we recruit more women into the field? And I know that everybody's like, well, let's just go to women's colleges, or let's go here and we'll just try to do recruiting like we've normally done it. Instead of doing men, we'll do women. Well, actually, I think you really need to think about some things about who the organization is. And we want to help companies recognize, I know you want to recruit, but how are you presenting yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Are you presenting yourself appropriately where that women would want to be a part of it? I don't think there's a question that they'd want to be a part of the industry, because I think the industry has shown that it can be a very successful opportunity for women. But the question is, has most companies made themselves attractive that women want to be a part of it? And that's just one of the examples of things that we're trying to do. We were able to recruit a wonderful executive, excuse me, Hillary Filarillo, to come in as executive director. She's been about 2 decades with the Money Management Institute, working with member services, working on women's initiatives, working on diversity initiatives in that space. And for her to come and join us, she's already taken us to a whole nother level. So we're pretty excited about the future.
That is outstanding, and it's great to see you being able to draw in people like Hillary to help you move this forward. And let's talk about that a little bit more. So, as the financial institution, you're sort of in the middle of the whole ecosystem, because we need to attract more women from high school through financial literacy and showing them the path, educate them, and then getting them into companies that support and empower women, not only to just start in their careers in financial services, but to continue all the way up to eventually becoming CEOs.
Right.
And so one of the things you have spoken about and you believe passionately about is the idea of taking on sponsorship and having sponsorship in helping women to stay the path once we've gotten them placed, once they're educated, placed into the right companies, is talk a little bit about your beliefs on that and why that's so important.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for asking that question and letting me share this. This is actually, I think, one of the most important things as we think about career progression for women. I try to promote that women should look for sponsors, not mentors. And it's not that they don't have mentors and look for mentors, but think about the concept. Mentors give you advice. Sponsors advocate. And what I have found is that women need advocates. Someone, because think about what the structure looks like today. The structure today is typically we have white males sitting in the room making decisions about, we got a P&L opportunity over here, and we've got a senior staff role over here, and they're deciding who is going to go in those positions. Well, who's speaking on your behalf when you're not in the room? That's sponsorship. And as we have seen his time and time again in corporate America, they are looking at white male executives and say, well, we need to give that person a stretch assignment. Well, when women have sponsors in these positions, whether it's in the field of financial advising or if it's at the corporate level, having an advisor in the room that says, this person, this woman should get a stretch assignment in order to put her on the path to being the next CEO. That's what you need. And so I am always saying, make sure that when you're entering into those relationships, that you understand and you're looking for the sponsorship where that someone is speaking on your behalf when you're not there to speak on your behalf. And also the recognition that someone's going to push you beyond your own comfort zone. I was asked to do things. I was like, oh my God, there's no way in the world I could do that. I don't have the qualifications. And studies have shown that women will look at a job and they'll say, well, I don't have all the prerequisites, so I'm not even going to apply. Or most men say, well, it's a job, and I figure I'll learn it while I'm there. Well, the thing is, even in sponsorship, not only advocacy, but there are people who are saying, you know what, you really got to stretch. And because they actually see how you think, how you process information, how you interact with other folks. And from that, they know that you will figure out how to get to the next level and be successful.
That is really some great advice, and I couldn't agree with you more. Throughout my own career, I didn't really know formally what it meant, sponsorship, but I was fortunate enough to have a CFO at one of the companies I had spent 18 years of my career with, and he was the advocate, and it really helped me. I had gone from a mid-level manager to becoming a division president for that company and reported into the corporate CEO for 12 years. And I don't know that I would have believed in myself as much as I should have at the time. And having that advocate was critical. So that's great. And I also think, George, you mentioned too, it's like our collective responsibility to make the time to do that for
Yes.
other women or people who find themselves in positions, whether it be a different race or different background, that don't have the same opportunity. We all should be giving back that in terms of time and focus, because we know what it does for all of us in the future. It
Yes.
provides more women, more people of color taking on roles, which changes the outcome in a positive way. And the research has shown that over and over again.
Yes. That's the thing I really love. First of all, we got to do more of getting you out to that you tell your story, because that is what women need to hear. That is what people of color need to hear. That let me show you how sponsorship works. And again, it doesn't take away from you still had to deliver, and you did.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And the thing is, you delivering showed people that were looking at you, your capabilities, and it just gave you more and more opportunities for you to continue to deliver. I just think that is so important. And I'm glad you said that. It's the other part. Now, this is where I think mentoring comes in, is that you may not be working in my company, but the fact that I can get guidance and advice from you, that's important mentoring. Added on to my sponsor who's opening the doors for me to go to that. You put all that together, now we're creating a model of achievement and success and opportunity. And again, the beauty of it is every job I've had, my successor was a woman that I'd been working with and developing over time. And when we are putting mentoring and sponsorship together, it's just more and more women getting opportunities to show their capability and how successful they can make an organization.
Absolutely. And we have some great companies who absolutely embrace this. I mean, my
Yes.
first guest I talked about, the only other male so far was Michael Durbin from Fidelity, and they have a Men as Allies programs and a corporate sponsorship program. But the more we can do that and show the great results, then it helps the mission you're doing move forward. It helps the success of companies moving forward. And it helps to balance, if you will, the transfer of wealth, the creation of wealth, and the sustainability of wealth across all
Yes.
demographics. And that is so important. So kudos to you as the president of one of the most important financial colleges out there for taking this mission so seriously and doing your part. Talk a little bit about other things you think companies can do to work with either your college directly or individually as organizations to continue supporting women in their careers. What other actions can they take?
Well, I'd mentioned one is actually stopping to think about how you're presented. So, it's amazing the small things. As simple as, does your website even show diversity on it? I mean, are there like women and people of color? What does your leadership look like? Obviously, it becomes important. Do you do business with diverse companies? Do you have a diversity inclusion program? There's a lot of little simple things. I also think it's important that, and I always like, when I look at some firms, I'm like, okay, are they always promoting the same person? But if you're promoting the women, and I mean, go ahead, tell the story about the successful women in your organization, the successful people of color in your organization, putting them out there to be seen, not as pictures, but actually as people who could be speaking on your behalf. Now, you want to talk about an advocate. When you have women stepping out there saying, this is a good place to work. Okay, now no place is perfect, so that's not the expectation. But if they're successful, they in their own right, they are representative of the success of our industry, and that they can talk about the firm that I work for is a good place for women. You know what? Now that's a company that's doing something when you can go out and have those. Yet, but you can't have your one and and then think you're going to go out and have a conversation, and then we're all going to believe you because it's the only person we ever see.
Yeah, and George, you talk about, so a couple things to pick up on that is, a lot of companies think it's about checking a box, as you've
Yep.
talked about and I've spoken about, and it's really not. It's
Right.
about doing things like training, removing hiring practices that put a natural bias in. And I love what you were saying too about how are you presenting your company. It's interesting because back when everyone was hiring millennials and they were an important part of the makeup of an organization, I remember sitting around a conference room one day with HR and saying, well, all our materials really don't speak to millennials. So if we want to attract millennials, we actually have to get a little more creative with how we're attracting them. And it was interesting because once we had that aha moment, which seemed
Right.
so simple, it was like, wow, this is great. And we actually had millennials participate in this. And so I think a lot of companies have figured that out now. But I think it's important that, yeah, look at your marketing materials, look at who is on your management team, look at your demographic makeup of the organization. Even at Investment News now, we are now more than 61% female, which was it's
Wow.
been a nice, interesting change. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So,
But I'm also glad you mentioned something, and that is looking at the biases and obstacles that actually may be in getting more women in, even if it's in your job descriptions. I don't think people think of that. I think this is what the job requires. But if you're putting things in there that may be more relevant because a man wrote it and is thinking like this is what we do, when there are differences. So sometimes I suggest to people, like, why don't you go get some women who don't work for you and ask them to read it and tell them, and ask them for their honest opinion about what they think of what you just wrote. And then this other thing that has always frustrated me. This was something that I had to deal with as a black male. I'm not a golfer and I don't drink. And then everybody's like, well, George, if you want to get ahead, you got to go to the bar after work,
Yeah.
drink with us. Okay. And then we're going to all meet on Saturday to go play golf. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, well, I don't drink and I'm not going to the bar to hang out with people screaming at me who are drinking. And then I'd like to stay married a little bit longer. And since you got me working all through the week, I don't think I'm going to play 5 hours of golf on Saturday.
Yeah,
I'm not going to
exactly.
explain that to my wife.
Yeah.
So it's just things like that, which have nothing to do with my ability to perform or my relationship with my clients.
Yeah.
That's
It's funny you bring those two things up because when I was younger in my career, well, first of all, I do drink now occasionally. I'll have wine or something like that, but I did not drink my first sip of alcohol until I was 27 years old.
wow.
And I started my career early. So we were just not brought up drinking
Right.
alcohol, etc. And I don't play golf. And in fact, it's really funny you say that because that's what all the guys did. That's what
Right.
you did. And that wasn't me. And in fact, coincidentally, my condo now that my kids are grown is on a golf course and I don't play golf. And then recently somebody said, you really should play golf just to kind of get the social aspect, etc. So I'm like, okay, I'll take a lesson. And I went down and I did the lesson. I thought, I really don't like playing golf, but I'm really good at socializing. So, what
Right.
I do now though is I make really good homemade pizzas. So I'm like, that's how I socialize,
There you
and I
go.
make that the activity, so it works.
Yeah. That's
I'm like,
great.
oh,
But it is tough that these things have been set. And I've actually seen some executives that all of the work they were doing in, okay, how do we try to make ourselves more attractive to millennials? I was like, well, where was this at for women?
yeah,
Where was this at for people of color? And yet they were reading about, well, this wave and this demographic, and I'm like, have you looked at the demographic information? what
yeah,
what is actually already here and what's just going to get more and more in terms of women's roles? But again, I mean, and I'll tell you, I would always wondered. I'm like, well, okay, is it because in the millennial group there's a number of young men? Is that why they were doing it? But it really, I actually saw more in that than I ever saw them do with women, and I still see women as the dominant group that's out there that's going to lead us in terms of where we go in the future.
well, great. I mean, and that's a very good part to sort of end today's discussion on. Is couldn't have said it better than I could have said it. But what's great, George, is not only have do you recognize that as a person, also in your role as the CEO and president of the American College of Financial Services, as someone who has personally had diversity and a person of color, you understand firsthand all the challenges and you are taking this and putting it into action, and you can't ask for more than that. And I think these conversations hopefully will help other companies and women realize there's a lot we can do, but it's our collective responsibility for us all to take action through things like sponsorship, advocating, through marketing your company differently, through creating programs that help you hire and attract the right person, removing biases. So many great takeaways and actions for our listeners. And my final question that I always ask every guest is, tell me in your words why her success matters.
Our success matters. One is the importance of teaching all of us to focus on the person and the strengths and the values that they bring. That's the first one. Second one, to me, you are a voice, a very, very powerful voice. And I like people who take a bold step and are creating leadership, and you're doing that. And the last thing is, as a minority, I believe in equality, and equality I define as opportunity. And your voice, this program, this effort, why this matters so much is creating that opportunity and empowering, and define empowering by letting women see what's already there and making it come out more and more. That's exciting to me. And I thank you for what you're doing.
Well, I really appreciate that, George, and I couldn't do it without people like you participating in the conversation and taking action. So Thank you very much for your time. I will continue to stay tuned to all the amazing things that you and the college are doing. And I wish you much continued success in everything you do.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.